My name is Claire Bennett. I am 34, and at 11:47 that night, my phone showed 58 missed calls from 5 numbers. A month earlier, those same people had skipped the grand opening of the company I had spent 8 years building. While I tested the roaster, my father texted, "It's a trivial event for someone running a tiny company. Don't bother us." That evening, my mother posted videos from a Mediterranean cruise with my brother. They raised glasses on the upper deck while I cleaned spilled coffee beans off my floor. I opened my flagship, thanked every employee, and waited until the last customer left before accepting what their absence meant. Then I canceled the recurring $1,850 payment I had sent toward their mortgage for nearly 3 years. Exactly 1 month later, my father called. He did not ask how the launch had gone. He did not congratulate me. His first words were, "Why hasn't our mortgage been paid?" For 2 seconds I almost apologized. That was how deeply they had trained me. Instead, I gripped the edge of my desk and replied, "Don't contact me about trivial matters." By midnight, the voicemails had changed from outrage to panic. My mother sent a bank notice and wrote, "They say we have 48 hours." My brother threatened my suppliers, but my father's message revealed what they had told the bank about me and what they had done with the money my payments freed up. That confession turned a family argument into something none of them expected. Before I tell you what that voicemail revealed, and why 3 adults who dismissed my success suddenly feared it, tell me what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. To understand why I nearly apologized on that call, you need to understand what I had spent 8 years trying to earn. I founded Ember and Oak Coffee in Austin when I was 26 with a secondhand roaster, a rented corner in a commercial kitchen, and 4 months of savings. I roasted before sunrise, delivered bags in my hatchback, and worked office pop-ups until I could afford my first storefront. By year 8, I employed 19 people, supplied 37 restaurants and hotels, and had leased a flagship roastery with a training lab and tasting room. It was profitable, debt-conscious, and mine. My parents, Richard and Susan Bennett, called it my coffee hobby. My older brother Jordan worked in private wealth management in Dallas, where his titles grew longer every few years. To my parents, his work represented permanence, and mine a phase I had failed to outgrow. Their preference was quiet enough to deny. When Jordan changed firms, they drove 3 hours for his welcome dinner. When I invited them to my second store opening, my mother texted that Jordan had an investor dinner and family should support the person carrying the bigger responsibility. I read it beside a tray of warm pastries and told my staff they had a scheduling conflict. The mortgage payments began the following year. My father's consulting income had fallen, their adjustable rate loan had reset, and an escrow shortage pushed their monthly housing cost beyond what they had planned. They were not destitute. They lived in a 4-bedroom house outside Georgetown, owned 2 cars, and belonged to a social club my mother treated like a second address. But they were cash poor and terrified of losing the image they had spent decades maintaining. They asked me to cover $1,850 a month while my father rebuilt his client list. I did not simply hand over cash. The payments went directly from Ember and Oak's operating account to the mortgage servicer and were categorized by my bookkeeper as non-deductible owner distributions. My father sent an email confirming that the arrangement was temporary, limited to 18 months, and created no ownership interest or continuing obligation for me. My mother replied to the same thread, "18 months should be more than enough. We will never forget this." At month 18, my father said he needed 1 more quarter. At month 21, my mother said stopping just before the holidays would be cruel. At month 24, no one asked anymore. The transfer simply left my account on the first business day of every month, and each time I considered canceling it, I imagined the sentence they would use, "After everything we did for you." The truth was more humiliating than the payment itself. I could afford the money. What I could not afford, or believed I could not, was being branded the ungrateful daughter. I kept paying because some part of me thought consistency might become proof of love. If I was helpful enough, successful enough, and undemanding enough, perhaps they would eventually look at my work without comparing it to Jordan's. That hope survived long enough for me to send them engraved invitations to the flagship opening 6 weeks in advance. The card did not describe a hobby. It listed the mayor's small business representative, 2 hotel purchasing directors, a regional food editor, and the employees whose promotions would be announced that day. My mother responded with a thumbs up. My father did not respond at all. Jordan sent flowers 2 days early, but the card read, "Congratulations from everyone at Langford Pierce Wealth Partners." His assistant had ordered them from the firm account. He had not added a single personal word. 3 weeks before the opening, my mother mentioned the cruise during a group call as if it had been booked years earlier. Jordan had been invited to a private networking program aboard a ship sailing from Barcelona to Rome. A European fund representative might attend, she explained, and the family's presence would help him appear established. I reminded her of my date. There was a pause, followed by my father saying, "We have to think about which event could actually change someone's future." I should have ended the call then. Instead, I emailed the opening itinerary again. I reserved 3 front-row seats. I even asked my operations manager to hold their name badges at the private entrance, because hope can make an intelligent person behave like evidence does not exist. At 6:10 on the morning of the launch, the flagship smelled of toasted sugar, fresh paint, and the first test batch from our new 40-kilo roaster. My team moved through final checks while I reviewed the temperature log. At 6:18, my father's text arrived. "It's a trivial event for someone running a tiny company. Don't bother us while we're handling something important for Jordan." My hand jerked. The clipboard struck an open bag, sending several pounds of green coffee across the floor. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the dry rattle of beans rolling beneath the steel tables. My production lead, Luis, reached for the broom, but I stopped him and knelt to help. I needed the physical task. I needed to gather something I could actually put back in its place. I did not tell the team what the message said. I changed into my jacket, checked the microphones, and asked that the 3 reserved chairs remain where they were. Even after the ribbon was cut, I watched the entrance between conversations. When the first panel began, I told myself my family might be late. When the food editor interviewed me, I caught myself looking over her shoulder. When we announced health coverage for every full-time employee and a paid certification program for our baristas, the room applauded, and I still looked toward those empty seats. The day itself was a success beyond our projections. A line curved around the block by 9. One of the hotel groups expanded its trial order before noon. The local business desk ran a photograph of my employees and me beneath the new Ember and Oak sign. My staff had built a wall displaying 8 years of milestones: the first handwritten invoice, our original dented roaster, the key from the first store, and the rejection letters from banks that had called the concept too risky. Customers stopped to read every card. Strangers understood the scale of the journey in 5 minutes. My own family had spent 8 years refusing to see it. At 4:32, while I was signing the final wholesale agreement of the day, my mother uploaded a video from the ship. She, my father, Jordan, and Jordan's wife, Vanessa, were standing beneath white lights on the upper deck. The caption read, "Supporting family wherever opportunity leads." The upload time matched the minute our employee promotion ceremony had begun. That detail ended the last excuse I had been preserving for them. They had not forgotten. They had made a choice, and publicly named it support. I finished the event. I thanked the last guests. I helped stack chairs because I did not want my employees to see me disappear after asking them to give everything. Only when I reached my apartment did I open the mortgage folder on my laptop. It contained 34 payment confirmations, the original 18-month email, 3 messages asking for extensions, and nothing, absolutely nothing, promising permanent support. My cursor hovered over cancel recurring payment for almost 20 minutes. I remembered my mother crying when they first asked for help. I remembered my father telling me I had saved their home. Then I remembered the word trivial. I understood finally that they had separated my labor from my money. The work was too small to respect, but the income it produced was large enough to claim. I canceled the transfer. Then I created a new monthly allocation in the same amount, $150 to an employee emergency and education reserve called the Ember Fund. I could not move back the $62,900 already paid, but I could decide where the next dollar went. The first deposit cleared the following morning. I did not announce what I had done. Revenge, if that was what my family would later call it, did not begin with a public speech. It began with one private decision. I would no longer finance people who treated my presence as optional. For 29 days, no one in my family contacted me. My mother continued posting cruise photographs after they returned. Jordan shared a polished summary of cross-border relationship building. My father liked every post. None of them liked, shared, or mentioned the article about my flagship, even when the Regional Hospitality Association featured it. The silence was so complete that I briefly wondered whether they had noticed the missing transfer and decided to handle their own obligation. On day 30, at 8:14 in the evening, my father called. I was in my office reviewing payroll projections. I answered because a small, stubborn part of me thought he might finally be calling about the launch. "Why hasn't our mortgage been paid?" he said. There was no greeting. He spoke as if he were calling an employee who had failed to complete an assigned task. I felt the old reflex rise in me, the need to explain, soften, rescue. For 2 seconds, I nearly told him I could fix it in the morning. Then I looked through the glass wall at the Ember Fund spreadsheet open on the conference room screen. That money now had names beside it: a certification course, an emergency dental bill, tuition support for an assistant manager studying accounting. "Don't contact me about trivial matters," I said. My voice was steady, but my hand was not. I ended the call and placed the phone face down. It began vibrating before it touched the desk. The 58 missed calls did not all come from my parents. They recruited people. My mother called from her number, my father's phone, and the social club's front desk. Jordan called 12 times. Vanessa called twice. An aunt, 2 cousins, and a family friend filled the rest. Some left angry messages about loyalty. Others tried tenderness. My mother moved between both in the same voicemail. "Claire, this is not how decent daughters behave. Please call me, sweetheart. We could lose everything." At 9:03, she sent a photograph of a letter from the mortgage servicer. The 48-hour deadline was real, but it was not an instant foreclosure threat. The notice said they had 48 hours to cure the shortage required to keep their loan modification agreement active. Otherwise, the account would be transferred to default counsel, and the existing loss mitigation review would close. One missed $1,850 transfer alone had not created that crisis. They had already fallen behind on their share, accumulated an escrow deficiency, and hidden it from me. I typed, "The original arrangement ended 16 months ago. I will not make additional payments." I did not send it. Any explanation would become an opening for negotiation. Instead, I took screenshots, exported the call log, and saved every voicemail. At 10:26, Jordan left the first threat. He said he knew decision-makers at 2 hotel groups that bought from Ember and Oak. If I embarrassed our parents, he would make sure people understood what kind of operator I was. 5 minutes later, my mother sent the bank notice again with 3 red circles around the deadline, as if the font had been the problem. At 11:41, my father left the message that changed the situation. "You cannot just stop," he said. "We listed your company contribution in the hardship package. The servicer approved the modified schedule because we showed them $1,850 in recurring family support. Jordan told us the home equity investment would repay everything after the European deal closed. If you pull out now, you make all of us look dishonest. I replayed it twice. They had represented a voluntary transfer from my company as dependable income without asking me. More troubling was the phrase, home equity investment. My payments had not merely protected their house. By covering part of the mortgage, I had allowed them to borrow against the remaining equity and place that money into something connected to Jordan. At 11:58, the call count reached 58. I turned on Do Not Disturb, forwarded the entire folder to my business attorney, and wrote one line in the email. They are using my company's name in a loan file and threatening my suppliers. Please tell me what we need to do. For the first time that night, the phone stopped controlling the room. By 9 the next morning, my attorney, Meredith Cho, had reviewed the voicemails and original email chain. I was not a borrower, co-signer, guarantor, or owner of the property. Their written confirmation limited my help to 18 months. 16 extra payments did not create a permanent contract. My father's voicemail suggested they had described my support inaccurately, but Meredith would not label it fraud without the submission. We could immediately address the use of my name and the threats against Ember and Oak. Meredith's cease and desist directed them to stop claiming I had any mortgage obligation, using my company in lender communications, or contacting my employees, suppliers, and customers. It also required preservation of documents relating to the hardship package and home equity transaction. The letter did not shout. Every claim came with a date or attachment. Before delivery, Jordan acted on his threat. From his Langford Pierce address, he told a purchasing director at Calder House Hotels that the dispute proved I was financially erratic. He claimed my family held an undisclosed interest in Ember and Oak and implied our contract posed a reputational risk. The director had reviewed our audited statements and knew I was the sole owner. She forwarded the email to me. This appears personal and inappropriate. Please confirm there is no change in ownership. I sent our current certification and copied Meredith. Calder House renewed its order that afternoon. I did not contact Jordan's employer or publish the email. The purchasing director had her own compliance obligations. Because he used his firm account to make an unverified commercial allegation, she forwarded it to Langford Pierce's compliance team. I learned that later. The cease and desist letters arrived by courier at 4 House. At 4:17, Jordan called from a blocked number. "You have always liked playing the victim," he said. "Now you are hiding behind a lawyer because you finally have a little leverage." "A little leverage?" I repeated. "A few coffee shops do not make you powerful. Mom and Dad could lose their house because you need attention." That sentence clarified the entire system. When my company earned money they could use, it was a serious resource. When it earned independence I could exercise, it became a few coffee shops. I told him all further business-related communication had to go through Meredith and ended the call. My parents shifted to public pressure. In an Austin community group, my mother wrote about an unnamed daughter who had abandoned aging parents over a misunderstanding. She omitted the cruise, 18-month limit, home equity loan, and 34 payments, but mentioned the daughter owned a local business. Anyone who knew us understood. Relatives added heart emojis. My aunt messaged my company page accusing me of choosing profit over blood. I did not answer publicly. My communications manager saved screenshots, hid comments naming employees, and posted our scheduled training lab feature. I wanted to place my father's text beneath my mother's story. Meredith reminded me that silence was not surrender when the other side was documenting itself. The preservation demand produced the mid-story revelation. My father hired a lawyer who responded with the proposed family resolution and attached selected pages from the loan modification package to prove, apparently, that the bank had relied on my payments. Those pages did the opposite. Under other recurring household income, my parents had entered business support from daughter, $150 monthly, ongoing. They had attached 6 months of transfer confirmations carrying the Ember and Oak account name. They had not forged my signature, but they had converted temporary voluntary help into a permanent assurance I had never made. The same response admitted the home equity line. My parents had drawn $118,000 against the property 11 months earlier. They used $78,000 to invest in a private hospitality fund Jordan was helping introduce to prospective clients, paid approximately $14,000 toward the cruise and related travel, and retained the rest for household expenses. Jordan had told them the investment could return enough within a year to clear the line and stabilize the first mortgage. Instead, the fund delayed its capital event. The line began charging a higher variable rate, and my parents' cash flow collapsed. The cruise had not simply happened on the same day as my opening. Part of it had been financed by equity they felt safe extracting because they assumed my company would continue covering $1,650 every month. They had skipped the launch of the engine, keeping their finances alive in order to celebrate the person who had encouraged them to take on more risk. Meredith responded in 4 pages. She rejected any continuing obligation, demanded written correction of every statement naming Ember and Oak, and warned that future interference with contracts would be documented as business harm. She did not threaten to expose them. She offered no bargaining figure. The boundary was simple: their mortgage, home equity line, investment, and travel expenses belonged to them. 3 days later, the mortgage servicer's deadline passed. My parents found enough money to make the immediate cure payment by emptying a savings account, but the payment only kept the review open. It did not erase the higher mortgage balance, the escrow shortage, or the home equity line. They needed sustained income they did not have. Jordan sent one final voice message that week. His confidence had thinned. Langford Pierce had placed his communications under review and removed him temporarily from the hospitality fund presentation. He blamed me, although I had never contacted the firm. For years, my family had treated accountability like an attack whenever it reached the favored person. This time, I had the documents to prevent them from rewriting the story. 2 weeks later, my parents requested a meeting. I agreed to 20 minutes at Meredith's office to see whether they could discuss the crisis without turning my bank account into the solution. Meredith sat beside me, my parents sat opposite, and Jordan joined by video from Dallas. My father began with numbers. Selling would destroy their retirement plan. Jordan's investment was temporarily illiquid, not worthless. 6 more payments from me could restore order. My mother blamed distress for her post. Jordan called his Calderhouse email a private warning and said the review could cost him a promotion. They spoke for 14 minutes. No one apologized for missing the launch. No one said the word trivial. Their only regret was that the consequences had moved faster than their excuses. When my father finally stopped, I gave them the only 3 sentences I had prepared. You did not lose my support because I missed a payment. You lost it when you decided my work was too small to respect, but large enough to fund you. My company and I owe you nothing, and every future communication about money or business will go through my attorney. The sale of your house, Jordan's review, and your embarrassment are consequences of your decisions, not punishments I created. Then I stood and left. My father shouted my name once from behind the closing door. I did not go back. In the elevator, my knees shook so badly that Meredith asked if I wanted to sit in the lobby. I said no. Strength did not feel like triumph. It felt like walking while every old instinct begged me to return and repair the damage for people who had caused it. Over 4 months, consequences unfolded that I had not engineered. Once the claim of ongoing business support was corrected, the servicer denied the proposed modification and referred the mortgage to default counsel. Notices arrived, review periods ran, and options narrowed. My parents listed the property before a foreclosure sale could be scheduled. They priced it to preserve their pride, but buyers saw the deferred maintenance. After 2 reductions, they accepted 12% below the original asking price. The mortgages, penalties, taxes, and selling costs consumed most of the proceeds. The house they had used as proof that they understood success left barely enough for moving expenses and several months of rent. Damaged credit made leasing difficult, so they moved into Jordan and Vanessa's two-bedroom townhouse for a few weeks. My mother took the guest room, my father converted part of the dining area into an office. Every financial disagreement became a four-person argument. Vanessa later apologized for joining the 58-call campaign. She had believed Jordan's version that I had promised to pay the mortgage for life. After seeing the documents and hearing arguments about the investment, she knew no such promise existed. "I should have verified the story before helping pressure you," she wrote. I thanked her without inviting further conversation. 6 weeks after my parents moved in, Vanessa left. By the third month, she and Jordan were formally separated. I did not celebrate. A marriage was not a revenge trophy, but neither would I accept blame for a fracture created by secrecy, misplaced loyalty, and intimidation. His career consequences were quieter but serious. Langford Pierce found that he had used company email to influence a client's vendor relationship, made an unsupported ownership claim, and failed to disclose his parents' investment in a fund tied to his business development activity. He lost the hospitality portfolio, much of his bonus, and consideration for managing director that year. Two clients requested different advisors. In private wealth management, trust can vanish without raised voices. Word reached parts of the Dallas finance community because the hotel purchasing director had copied her company's counsel, not because I leaked anything. Jordan had created the record himself. His attempt to make my company look unstable became evidence of his own poor judgment. My mother's campaign also collapsed. A retired neighbor, Marlene, replied, "Susan, I attended Claire's opening while you were on the cruise. Her team reserved seats for you. Perhaps this does not belong online." A social club friend recalled my mother praising me for taking care of the mortgage. Someone asked why an adult daughter owed payments on a house she did not own. My mother deleted the post, but screenshots had reached the circles she tried to recruit. I had imagined public vindication many times during the years of quiet favoritism. When it arrived, it did not feel like applause. It felt like oxygen returning to a room. I no longer had to argue that the pattern existed. Their own words, filings, and messages had made it visible. Meanwhile, the flagship exceeded its first quarter target by 23%. Calder House added 6 properties after we passed a surprise quality audit. No customer left because of Jordan's email. 2 wholesale leads came through the director who had received it. The Ember Fund also made its first 3 awards. One employee completed an advanced roasting certification. Another used emergency support to avoid a predatory loan after an unexpected expense. A shift supervisor began evening accounting classes that would prepare her for an operations role. Each award was exactly $1,950 or less. Every time I approved one, I remembered what that amount used to purchase. Not my parents' safety, as I had told myself, but their freedom from confronting their own decisions. My parents' lawyer made one last attempt to argue that my extended payment history created a reasonable expectation of continued support. Meredith answered with the 18-month email, the absence of any consideration or guarantee, and the corrected loan documents. They dropped the claim. The only message that followed came from my father. "You have made your position clear." He meant it as condemnation. I read it as confirmation. 1 year after the launch, the 3 reserved seats were gone from the flagship. In their place stood a small display about the Ember Fund and the employees whose training it had supported. I did not build the display to insult my family. Their names appeared nowhere. I built it because money should express values honestly. For nearly 3 years, mine had been paying for access to affection that was never actually available. Now it paid for skill, stability, and opportunity. Jordan contacted me twice. The first message defended his intentions and blamed stress. I did not answer. The second was shorter. "I was wrong to contact your client. I understand why you will not trust me." I replied through Meredith that he was not to contact Ember and Oaks partners and that I was not ready for a personal relationship. An apology can be acknowledged without being rewarded with immediate access. My parents moved from Jordan's townhouse into a modest rental outside Dallas after the house sale closed. My mother sent a card on the anniversary of the flagship opening. Inside, she had written, "We hope the business is doing well." There was no apology and no reference to the seats they had left empty. I scanned the card into the family correspondence folder and did not respond. Keeping evidence was not bitterness. It was how I stopped nostalgia from editing the past. We did not reconcile. We did not gather around a holiday table and pretend one difficult year had corrected decades of ranking people by status. My boundaries remained plain: no financial support, no access to company information, no contact with employees or clients, and no conversation in which family was used as a substitute for accountability. If they wanted a different relationship, they would have to build it through consistent behavior over time. I would not finance the construction. For most of my life, I believed saying no would make me the person who broke the family. What I finally understood was that the family arrangement had depended on me never saying it. I was expected to be useful without being celebrated, available without being considered, and generous without keeping any record of the cost. The moment I stopped serving as the silent wallet, everyone who benefited called the boundary cruelty. They did pay a heavy price. My parents lost the house and the social identity built around it. Jordan lost a promotion, clients, money, and the easy certainty that his choices would always be protected. Their consequences were not proof that I had become heartless. They were proof that I had been carrying more of their lives than anyone admitted. I did not win because they suffered. I won because their suffering no longer had the power to draft my money, my company, or my conscience into service. Ember and Oak was never trivial. Neither was the woman who built it. If your family once called your success insignificant, then demanded its benefits when they were in trouble, have you ever said no? And what price did you have to pay for finally saying it?
Thank you for supporting our channel and watching until the final moment. This video is completely fictional and makes only for storytelling and educational entertainment. We hope to remind you that not every person who says sorry is ready to change. Real accountability is shown through patience, honesty, and consistent action, not only through words spoken after consequences arrive.